Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining. We're just giving time to make sure everybody can get into the Zoom. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hi, and welcome to Making Digital Therapeutics Work, 10 Principles to Drive Patient Engagement. My name is Anna King, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator at MassMEDIC. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you to our sponsor, Star, for bringing us this webinar. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Please type any questions that you may have into the Q&A section below. We will answer these as time allows, but if we don't get to your question today, we'll make sure to follow up with you. We have a great program today on digital therapeutics, and with that, I'll turn it over to our speaker, Christopher Scales, Director of Strategy and Insight at Star. Thanks.
Thank you. So I hope everyone can hear me. Should be working fine. Thanks for the introduction. So as MassMEDIC said, my name's Christopher Scales, Director of Strategy and Insight at Star's Health Tech Practice. And today we are going to talk to you about digital therapeutics. And the purpose of the talk is we're going to take a look at some of the major players in the digital therapeutics space. We're going to cite many examples of patient engagement from this fast emerging digital health category. And we all know that the benefits of DTX are becoming clear. So, you know, they have the potential to deliver evidence-based health outcomes. They have the potential to reduce the cost attributed to medical non-adherence by driving patient engagement through a treatment plan. And obviously, they are able to fuel or patient autonomy, which can potentially relieve the burden that we're seeing on the healthcare system. However, engagement is really key, or patient engagement is really key to realizing the potential, because the success of digital therapeutics really depends on a patient's willingness, not just a patient actually, also a healthcare professional's willingness to adopt and stay engaged in a digital therapeutic plan. And in the talk, I'm gonna discuss a little bit about how we're seeing this being done in the market. So before we talk about that, I just want to tell you a little bit about Star, the company I work for. Star is a company that designs and builds digital products and services. Please check us out at www.star.global. Our team's located in multiple locations around the globe. I'm sitting in Europe, in Copenhagen. We're in Silicon Valley, Tokyo, Munich, Wrocław in Poland, London and Shanghai. And our distributed teams help our clients ideate, build, launch, and scale groundbreaking products. A little bit about myself. I have a 20-year background in product strategy, digital product strategy. I've held various positions in strategic design consulting and internal corporate design groups. And Star's health tech practice is working very actively in the space of digital therapeutics, also remote patient monitoring and telehealth. And we've also been developing solutions in diabetes care, behavioral health, cognitive decline, mental health, and ophthalmology. We have, in the Star Health Tech practice, we have a dedicated team of healthcare engineers, designers, and regulatory experts. And collectively, we have a vast experience of building, scaling, and bringing products to market in the digital healthcare and medtech space. Our design and strategy team consists of highly professional industry experts with strong experience in the health tech industry. And collectively, we share years of experience in bringing healthcare products to market. So globally, we've worked with major names throughout the health tech, medtech, and digital healthcare ecosystem. Some of our clients include Constant Therapy, Clarify Health, OneConcern, eGym, and many others. Which unfortunately we are unable to name. Okay, so let's get back to the subject of digital therapeutics and begin by looking at some market industry statistics related to digital health. So the global digital therapeutics market size was 3.02 billion in 2021. By 2030, it's estimated to reach 35.4 billion. That represents a category annual growth rate of 31.4% throughout the forecasted period of 2021 to 2030. And investments in digital therapeutic companies in the US have grown on average by 40% a year over the past 7 years. So that's pretty vast growth here. And what we're seeing is that the trend is boosting the utility of digital therapeutics and interest from major stakeholders in the healthcare system. By 2025, the number of people using digital therapeutics is expected to reach 652.4 million worldwide. That's almost double the number of users this year. This projected growth will sort of drive a lot of interest from insurance-led DTX revenue and new reimbursement models, which is something that we'll discuss a little bit later on. We also saw the acceleration of telemedicine due to the pandemic was also something that was a big driver of growth in this space, and we'll also touch upon that. So a little bit about what we're seeing in the regulatory space as well, because I think it's important that we give a little bit of context. The success of enabling regulatory pathways for digital therapeutic solutions has very much a cyclical relationship with, let's say, DTX patient and healthcare professional engagement. So ultimately what that means is the greater success and adoption you have with patients and the ability to demonstrate evidence of efficacy, the more it will help push regulatory approval and fuel larger scale buy-in from various healthcare stakeholders, primarily providers, payers, and patients. So patient engagement is really, really key. It's the key driver to this in many, many ways. And when we look at what's happening right now in the regulatory space, it's still somewhat undefined. This is primarily due to the fact that we're looking at convergent industries. So we're combining two industries here, healthcare and technology, which is sort of creating some additional complexity to regulatory considerations. But however, progress is being made across regions, not just in the US, but also in Europe and in Asia. And for example, we're seeing new reimbursement codes in the US for remote patient monitoring and telehealth, which is driving healthcare professional uptake. So let's talk a little bit about the research we did to arrive at the insights that we're going to share. So in order to arrive at these principles, we studied an array of digital therapeutic applications, 36 in total, okay? And they covered a range of diseases and conditions: diabetes care, addiction recovery, oncology care, cognitive decline, and mental health. And I think one of our key observations is, although the whole sort of digital therapeutic space is relatively still in its early days, there's a lot of very advanced let's say, user experience and product design out there already. And I think what we're witnessing through DTX is a great example of how, and I think many have heard this term, the idea of, the consumerization of healthcare. I think digital therapeutics is a great example of how healthcare is becoming consumerized, because in terms of consumer experience or patient experience, the quality of the product out there is often on par with many of the direct consumer applications we use on a daily basis, whether that be financial applications, social media, e-commerce, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what this is a response to the patient or the consumer, because patients are consumers as well, becoming increasingly discerning. So, the level of expectation for a good experience is getting higher by the day. They're not willing to accept anything that's not on par with the other applications they're using on a daily basis. And I think they're relatively unforgiving. And if it's not on par, they'll drop it. Like that. So this is really, really important, especially when we think about the implications of someone not using one of these digital therapeutic applications from a point of medical non-adherence. And when we looked at sort of the landscape, right, that there's kind of sort of three buckets. I mean, so the core sort of, bucket that we looked at was obviously the regulated space, the digital therapeutic, which is classified as a SAMD. And obviously, that's classified as a device that delivers a medical intervention to treat a disease, a medical intervention to manage a disease, or a medical intervention to improve a health function or prevent a disease. So this was primarily the area we're looking at, which is the regulated space. But also around there's also sort of some non-regulated categories that are also very, very relevant, where we can actually learn a lot. And that is the wellness space, and within that we look at mental health, and then also the fitness space. So if you look at the wellness and mental health space, this is a growing space. We're seeing mental health becoming less of a stigma. We're seeing a lot more people are looking for support in this space, and we're seeing many, let's say, primarily direct-to-consumer digital wellness and mental health applications, which are being channeled to market. So it can be digital consumer, we're also seeing this being channeled through large-scale employers who are offering this as a sort of a preventative health strategy, which is offered by payers ultimately to reduce claim costs related to stress leave. So there's a huge focus here, and again, ultimately some of the tools and techniques that we're seeing in these applications are very, very similar to what we're seeing in regulated digital therapeutic applications. And then we have the whole fitness and wellness, or let's say the fitness industry, where again, if you think about a fitness chain, for example, a lot of them are doing digital applications. The churn for someone going to the gym is very, very high. On average, someone will quit going to the gym after 3 months. And so for an owner of a fitness chain, you've got to keep your customers engaged on a daily basis and keep them motivated to stay committed to their training programs and training commitments. So a lot of the things that we're seeing are similar, and we borrowed inspiration from these. And looking at all the patterns, all the applications, we started to see patterns emerge about how these tactics were doing, and that's what kind of formed the principles that I'm going to show you. So let's look at the engagement principles. Before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what I call adoption drivers versus engagement drivers. So what you see here on the left side are what we would say represent a common feature set of a digital therapeutic application. So and they would probably represent the sort of the common value proposition that is being pushed to the market, i.e. to patients, healthcare providers, and payers. And if you look, and the benefits of these features are relatively clear, and they'll drive uptake, they'll drive adoption. So we call them the adoption drivers. So talking a little bit about some of these, common things that we see are logbooks. So a logbook is a way in which a patient can actively track a symptom, or they can track an intervention throughout a treatment plan. And through that, they can start to gain insights into how their symptoms are behaving or are being affected over time according to a specific treatment. And then in addition to that, there can be a remote patient monitoring functionality, and allowing a healthcare professional to monitor that patient's adherence to that treatment plan remotely. You can have a lot of these applications, they will have tutorials and educational programs allowing patients to build awareness and understanding around a specific condition or disease. This is also very, very prevalent. And then we have sometimes you can have a virtual coach or a chatbot you can speak to, or it could be actually a direct link to a certified professional, either via a live video link or chat. Sometimes even they'll offer some sort of automated digital triage, for example. If it's a chronic condition and you're having a symptom, you could go through some sort of automated triage through the application to gain some sort of understanding of what that symptom is. So we see a lot of these types of functionalities and features in them. And I think the point that I want to make here is that these are not what is going to engage your user on the long term. If I then enter to the right, you can see what I call the engagement drivers. And the engagement drivers are highlighting the point that we first need to understand the theoretical underpinnings of digital health engagement. And this is based on theory around psychological and human-computer interaction theory. So what we see here are examples of sort of basic human needs. Human needs, they're related to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're related to, self-actualization. And ultimately, if you want to engage a patient on the long term through a treatment plan, you've got to resonate to these needs. You've got to resonate to them on a deeper level. Okay, so things like giving them a sense of mastery over that condition, understanding the purpose. Why am I doing this? Helping them to gain a sense of achievement, of achieving something throughout their day, giving them a sense of esteem if they're suffering from a condition. If you can try to resonate to your user through on this deeper level, you have a better chance of engaging them. But obviously, the big question is how do you do this through a digital application? And that's what I'm going to show you. Sorry, let's move to the next slide here. But before I do that, just to show you this curve, and this kind of drives home the idea, right? So if you think about a care pathway through the various steps of, there's an awareness phase where a patient or a healthcare professional becomes aware of the therapeutic. They would consider it, they would adopt it, and then they would start to use it. And as I said, the adoption drivers is what's going to drive adoption, but the novelty of those drivers will fade over time, and it's the engagement drivers that will drive engagement throughout the usage period. So, if we think about some statistics here, so just 52% of digital health applications are retained over a 30-day period, and only 20% see a 1-year retention. So basically, what we're saying here is 50% of people who adopt a digital application will stop using it after 30 days. Okay, and again, if you think about the implications and the cost of that for a digital therapeutic, that's pretty impactful. So that's something that we have to try to resolve. So here are the 10 principles, and I'm going to go through them each one by one, and I'm going to show you some examples. And again, they're inspired by what we've seen on the market today, and each principle is supported by 2 to 3 product examples that we see on the market today. So let's just dive straight into them. So the first one is really about this idea of control, right? And so we call it feeling a sense of control. So at the end of the day, regardless of what condition or disease you have, everyone needs to feel have some sense of control over that condition or disease, right? They want to have an understanding and awareness of how it behaves. They would like to understand patterns in its behavior, and they want to understand the correlation between things like time, trigger, and symptoms. And I think that once you have a better understanding of these kinds of things, and you have a better understanding of how your condition behaves, it can, to a certain extent, relieve that sense of anxiety you feel of what's going to happen next, and it gives you that sense of mastery over your condition. So again, in the top right of the slide, you'll see that we've said mastery here is the engagement driver. And if you look at some of these examples here, Research by Therapeutics, it's an application for treatment of opioid use disorder. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing it's insights for the patient to understand how their emotional triggers are affecting their cravings over time. So this is an example where through some sort of logging system, they're tracking their triggers and their cravings, and they can start to see patterns. And based on that, it starts to help them understand things and build awareness of how they're behaving in certain situations. OneDrop for diabetes, they offer a feature called health forecasting. This is using AI. But what that's doing is it's allowing the patient to receive an accurate prediction of where their glucose levels will be up to 12 hours in advance. So again, it's giving them a little bit of a prediction, helping them to prepare accordingly. And the one on the right, Propeller Health, which is for treatment of asthma. In the example we're showing you here, is the application is predicting how the patient's day is going to be, considering external factors such as weather. So that's a first example where this idea about giving the patient a sense of control. I'm not saying they will have control, but giving them a sense that they have control is an important engagement driver. We go to the next one. We call this quantifying progress. So in this one, there are kind of two things here that I wanted to call out. The first one is about this idea of progress bars, right? So progress bars are a common theme, and you can see in all three of these examples, there's a progress bar. And it basically, what it does, it tells you how far you've come, but it also tells you how far you've got to go, right? So making that really explicit can give users that sense of accomplishment, which I mentioned to you earlier on. And accomplishment is going to feed your self-esteem, and it's going to motivate you and inspire you to take the next step. And it's going to give you a sense of purpose because there's an outcome in sight, a visible goal or an end game. And it kind of helps you to answer, why am I doing this? What am I working towards? The other thing that I think is really interesting on these examples is how these three applications have defined their own proprietary metric system in order to quantify patient progress. So, and again, it's this idea about, if we look at Sleepio here for sleep disorder on the left, this idea about having a sleep score, right? About having a score is something. It can arguably be excessively engaging. The idea about, this is my score, and it's a very, very powerful way of knowing where I am. It's also an interesting way of you being able to compare how you're doing versus other people, because it's a very, very simple way of making comparisons based on your score. So what Sleepio have done is they've created a metric around sleep efficiency, and that's basically the this is as 81%, and it's defined by the difference in time between sleeping and being in bed. So it's a really, really simple, really simple metric. If you look at Happify, the end game here for them, it's about well-being, right? But how do you measure well-being? And what they've done is they've defined a metric system that'll measure your well-being against 5 skill sets. And through the app, users can participate in a range of science-based activities and games through which that score is correlated. And obviously, in the screenshot you see here, the user gains a sense of where they need to invest more effort to achieve well-being. So they need to work on their empathy and giving skills. So again, this is a really, really nice example where they've defined an abstract metric system to help people really measure their progress. And again, the final one, which is an application for cognitive decline, is it gives insights into your brain profile. So again, you have a brain profile which is broken down to some specific categories. And again, via a series of targeted neuro games, audio sessions, and real life exercises, you can strengthen certain metrics. So that's the second one, quantifying progress. The third one is a really important one, which we call establishing trust. So trust is a fundamental component of the patient-doctor relationship. And is really associated with increased satisfaction and adherence to treatment. So it's a really essential element to driving Dtx adoption and engagement. So I think so again, in this instance, we're not just talking about the patient, we're talking about the healthcare professional. Obviously, adoption by the healthcare professional is also very, very key. Obviously, as reimbursement opportunity becomes more clear through digital therapeutics, that's ultimately something that's going to drive uptake. But I think the other thing that's going to drive uptake is this evidence of engagement, evidence of compliance. And I think that what you're seeing here, I think that, how will we get the healthcare professional to actually trust that digital therapeutics is providing value to them? Ultimately, the end game here is to deliver evidence of efficacy so they can, which is going to be related to value-based payment models, et cetera, But ultimately, the idea of being able to just see that a patient is adhering to a treatment plan is going to be of considerable value for a healthcare professional. So what you see in this that dashboard on the left here is it's for Propeller Health. It's a RPM dashboard for a healthcare professional, and it shows a combined list of doctors, patients who can easily it combines a combined list of patients and doctors can easily track the patient adherence. So it enables them to follow the positive outcomes and drives that trust in digital therapeutics. They can track adherence, and they can also get notifications during non-adherence. The other really important part to this is the fact that it has to fit seamlessly into their workflow. If that doesn't fit into their workflow, again, they're not necessarily going to adopt and engage with it. So I'd say the idea of making it relevant to their workflow is also an element of forming trust with the healthcare professional. When it comes to trust with the patient, I think that, again, this is, for me, the important piece around this is when these types of digital applications are enabling richer, more objective conversations between the healthcare professional and the patient during a consultation. And I think that not only does that benefit the healthcare professional, but also from a patient's point of view, it really helps them to articulate and communicate their needs to the doctor in a more effective way. And I think by fueling that better relationship between healthcare professional and the patient, that's going to again drive trust in the product. Obviously, there's the classic issue about trust in data, and I think the example here is just again, we also need to ensure that patients are feel comfortable with how data is being used in a specific context. The fourth one is called making achievements tangible. So making something tangible, making an achievement tangible is again very motivational. Again, it's as we said earlier on, it's a concrete way of measuring the progress you've made. Again, you could argue that it's a measurable way, and I think this is a lot of what they're trying to do is make that measurable. And an achievement can do different things. It can highlight what you've gained, what you've lost, or what you've prevented. And here are different examples of what it's doing. And the measure of those three things is a reward, right, for your effort and commitment to sticking to the plan. And a measure makes it really, really easy for someone to grasp, right? It's clear, it's simple, it's memorable. It's something that they can take home and share with friends and family. You know, if you look at the one in the middle for smoking cessation, the metric or the achievement is you've won 60 minutes of your life back. It's pretty straightforward. It's very measurable. Again, highlighting what you've prevented as opposed to what you've gained. Again, at something that can give a sense of achievement and esteem, and in contrast to One Drop, which is treating diabetes, they're talking about weight loss, right? So this is how much you've lost 32 pounds, you've reached your weight goal, and it's a pretty clear sort of way of sort of measuring your achievement. Hinge Health on the right is combining virtual physical therapy with personal health coaching and education to help you get release from muscle and joint pain. And again, 3 weeks of activity in a row, great job. So again, highlighting the fact that you have remained consistent to the therapeutic program. So that's 3 examples of where making achievements tangible can drive engagement and give people a real sense of achievement. There's obviously feeling part of a community is a big driver, and we're seeing a lot of communities that are embedded into these various digital applications. Often it's a partnership with an existing community or an integration to an existing community, rather than building your own one, because that takes a long time. So that's really how we see this working right now. There's something very powerful about this idea of shared accountability with a community of peers to collectively achieve a goal, right? And what it does is it basically enhances your sense of duty as a team player, right? For example, you know, making a public pledge is a strong way to feel one's sense of obligation to stay on track, right? You know, this is a you know, really powerful thing. So if you look at Clickerteam on the left, again, it's smoking cessation. What this does is allows the user can assign supporters, friends and family. They make a pledge or they make a commitment to achieve a goal, and the supporter's job is to hold them accountable for the commitment they've made or the pledge that they've made. Again, social dynamics, very powerful way to drive engagement. Armada Health in the middle, it supports people with diabetes. And this is just an example where you know, within a community you're sharing you know, tips and tricks for healthy cooking, you know, incentivizing and motivating each other to eat healthily, and you can feel each other's support. The one on the right is for alcoholism, and I like this because it's about anonymous peer support. So what this does is it allows people to speak anonymously to peers, because obviously alcoholism is quite a stigmatized condition, and it allows you to have conversations or chats with people, but you remain anonymous. So this is another interesting way of doing it when you're dealing with something which maybe has a lot of stigma assigned to it. This idea about comparing oneself to others, when we discussed the name of this, but we don't want to mean this, we don't want this to be reflected in a negative tone. This is really about benchmarking, right? So how am I doing versus everyone else who has the same condition as me? This is really this is a real really powerful motivator, right? So this idea about comparing yourself to others, it can give you reassurance that you're not the only one experiencing those symptoms, right? And, you know, it can give you, again, if you're suffering from a chronic condition, it can give you a sense of esteem. Yeah, my score is down, but so is everyone else's, right? And that sense of belonging, right? So I'm part of a community, and there's also people out there that are struggling with the same symptoms as I'm struggling from. And again, this is, and I think this is about reassurance. And these examples for me are beautiful ways of how data is being used to create real value for users, right? It's really meaningful, this information. You know, the fact that, you know, there are, you know, if you're trying to give up smoking, there are 229 other people that feel the same as you today. Or even the one on the right, which is for treatment of oncology care, right? And, you know, 1 in 10 patients undergoing similar treatment experience the same symptom as you. I think there's a really very powerful ways of using data to create meaningful experiences that are going to drive engagement for patients. When we every digital therapeutic, as I said earlier on, arguably offer some sort of direct access to a coach, right? Primarily a certified coach. This is primarily through chat, but it can also be through live video, a link embedded into the app. Also, we see remote patient monitoring solutions whereby care professionals can track patients remotely through dashboards, et cetera, as I said to you earlier on. The emotional benefits here, that it's really reassuring to know that there's someone watching over you. And I think that's that idea, that there's always someone there, and there's someone available, usually 24/7, right? As someone with certified expertise. And I think that's the beauty of this. It's not something you don't have to go and make an appointment. You just reach out and someone's always going to be answering, are there to answer specific questions you have. For the sake of time, I'm not going to dive into too many examples because I realize we're quite far into the hour. I think the one that I want to call out here, which I find really interesting, is from ZocDoc. ZocDoc is not a digital therapeutic; it's a telehealth platform in the US. But what they're doing here is your users are able to source the right, the ability to source a specific physician to suit your specific needs is a key part of their value proposition. And again, we talk about consumerization of healthcare. This is a great example because this reminds us of, you know, Airbnb or Uber, where HCPs are being rated by users according to things like, you know, bedside manner and waiting time. And again, this is a really nice example where we're starting to you know, see consumerization of healthcare. Virtual assistants is also something which is very prevalent. Again, chatbots are ultra convenient. They're always on, available anytime, anywhere. They're not human, right? But they're really good at things like nudging you, encouraging you, guiding you through a tutorial or a challenge. So used in the right way, they can actually be pretty good. We see them in various forms, chat, also voice assistants, and we're also seeing combination of voice and avatar. And, you know, there's in my opinion, a vast untapped potential in virtual assistants in the Dtx space, specifically working with voice and avatar. And other examples where computer vision is also being used. The one in the middle, Kaya Health, it uses computer vision, where you're doing physical exercises, and there is a voice from the phone. You place the camera, you place the phone so it's watching you do the exercises. You repeat what you see on the screen, and you'll get corrective feedback via a voice assistant as you're actually performing those exercises in real time. Sleepio is using an avatar with a voice. Avatars are very good at building some sort of bond with, you know, some sort of emotional bond with a voice assistant, and this is definitely something that we're seeing increasingly more of. experience principle number 9, efforts and playful interactions. So the integrity of the patient's data is really highly dependent on their willingness and ability to actively track the necessary data. So we know that active tracking, when we talk about logbooks, logging your symptoms and your interventions on a daily basis are highly important. Otherwise, the data is going to be very raw and very unstructured. So it requires discipline, and this is being delegated to the patient. It's the patient's responsibility to do that. There are some applications that integrations to wearables, so you can have passive tracking where it could be a smartwatch, for example, or another type of wearable sensor, which is tracking biometric data passively. But the majority of these are about active tracking, such as tracking your dietary intake, for example. The important thing here is you've got to make that tracking as effortless as possible for the patient. You've got to remove any barriers, any inconvenient barriers, because if there's any inconvenience to doing it, they just will not do it, right? So it's about this idea about making them effortless, but also a secret is also looking at playfulness, because people are inherently attracted to playfulness and sort of fidgeting with things that are playful. And the one on the example on the left here is a beautiful way of you tracking your mood. I think this is something that one has to do throughout the day, and you just literally with your thumb you click and hold the screen, and then you drag to animate the facial expression, which is going to capture how you're feeling. It's a very effortless, playful way of logging your current state. On the other hand, there are other technologies we're going to look at, such as natural language processing, where literally you are just speaking, or you're logging information via your voice. And again, a very effective way of removing the effort required to track. It could be a conversation you're having with a voice assistant who's asking you specific questions and you're replying. This is a very good way of doing it. And then also there are digital biomarkers. So for example, the example we see here from Mindstrong, it tracks patients' mood passively by how they type and swipe and scroll, but it can also measure stress and mental health through the intonation and tone of your voice when you're speaking. So that's another interesting way of you being able to track things passively. But ultimately, the point here is make it effortless. If there is not a technology that is feasible, think about that user experience, about how that patient is going to actually track that data in a really, really effortless way. And finally, to close on these, we have what we call fund size learning. As I said to you earlier on, tutorials and learning are a key part of digital therapeutics. Learning, the idea of learning, it sounds like work, right? And you need to remove that association to learning and tutorials, and you have to make it fun, make it feel, we call it fun size. What does fun size mean? It means making it really easy to consume. We always use the analogy of a snack. If you're snacking on the knowledge that you need to consume throughout the day. It's small snippets of information which are delivered in a very fun, easy to read, easy to consume way. In fact, it doesn't just have to be through. It can also be delivered through voice. If you think about the one on the right, this is just small little audio files, and you can actually for Headspace on the right, and you can actually select whether you want those to be narrated in a male or female voice, and it's something you can listen to on the go with a pair of headphones or something like that. So when it comes to education and learning, make it fun, make it very simple, easy to consume, remove the association to work. Okay, so that is the 10 principles that I'm going to present to you today. Just to close, I'm going to just give it a little bit of context in terms of how we put this into practice. Many of you may have heard of or are aware of the process of applying a design thinking methodology, which is essentially the idea of being user-centric in the way you design digital products and services. And the principles that I shared to you today are something that can be plugged into the empathize and define phase of a design thinking process. So, i.e., this approach is something that you really need to think of or apply in the really early phases of the conception of conceiving your solution. And they're extremely helpful in setting the right direction. So tracking back, what we said was patient engagement is one of the key drivers in ensuring a successful DTX solution. So this shouldn't be underestimated in terms of its value when you're looking at planning your strategy around building one of these products. So first thing is this idea about empathizing. Ask your target patients the right questions. Don't ask them what it is that motivates them. Asking about, what, how do they get a sense of prestige, and all the other engagement drivers that I spoke to you about. These are the kind of conversations that you want to have. You want to have conversations with them on a much deeper level. And then once you understand those insights, then you can translate that into what we call, concepts or product ideas, and then you look at translating those into UX design solutions. So it's a really, really important part. And I think there's a saying that we use, which we say when we speak to end users, target patients, target healthcare professionals. If you ask the wrong questions, you'll get the wrong answers. And ultimately, this is about asking them the right questions so you get the right answers. Because if you do get the wrong answers, it could set you on the wrong path from the get-go. Okay, so thanks very much. That is all I have to share today about 10 principles to drive patient engagement in digital therapeutics. And we have 12 minutes left for if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Christopher. That was wonderful. So at this time, please drop any questions into the Q&A chat below, and we will do our best to get to them. Okay, so we do have our first question, and that's, where do you see the relationship between DTX and pharma?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you can, a digital therapeutic can act as a supplement to the delivery of a drug, right? So, and I think, we talked about medical non-adherence being a huge problem. It's a huge cost to payers. The benefit for pharma is whether it's a specific drug, it could also be, a collaboration between a pharma company and medtech doing a direct delivery device, but essentially the digital therapeutic is the companion to the drug to motivate and engage the user in the treatment plan that they're working with. So ultimately, the end game for a pharma company is the benefit there is a more effective treatment plan.
Wonderful, thank you. And another one is, what would be important first steps for a legacy company looking to enter the space with software products on the market?
Yeah, so the experience strategy that I presented you today is just one component that you have to think about. Ultimately, the strategic foundation you need to build revolves around what is your reimbursement strategy. That's first and foremost, right? Ultimately, the business case needs to come first. Then we need to think about the regulatory pathway. There are different ways in which you can take here. Do you want to go start by D2C to gain some traction in the market? Do you go directly as a regulated device, go through the directly to providers? So the regulatory pathway is really, very important. Another really important component to think about is your interoperability strategy. If you want to add an RPM solution to this, then you need to think about how you're going to integrate your system to an EMR or a hospital information system, so that the healthcare professional consume the data. So I would say, and then the fourth one I would say is your experience strategy. How are you going to ensure you drive engagement? So what I presented to you now is maybe one of 4 or 5 things that you need to consider when you're defining your strategy for building one of these.
Great, thank you. And another question from Harriet. In your experience, are you seeing these companies building these features or buying them off the shelf? And what do you think of each option?
Good question. There are white label solutions. There are white label companies that you can buy an off the shelf solution for, and you can customize it to fit your specific needs. That's one option you can take. There are various trade-offs. I think that the main trade-off here is that if you build your own proprietary solution and you're in a competitive market, you're probably looking at a digital therapeutic as a way of building strategic advantage in your market to differentiate yourselves from your competitors. That's not necessarily something you can do with a white label solution. So the value of investing in your own proprietary solution is market differentiation to give you advantage in the market.
Okay, great. And another one from Eric. Have you considered digital therapeutics that don't use smartphone interface? And do you have any examples?
Wow. Well, yeah, voice. We're seeing voice UI. The uptake of voice UI has actually been slower than expected. About 2 years ago, it was quite a hot topic in the healthcare space, using voice UI and natural language processing. I think when it comes to digital therapeutics for aging population, there's a great fit for voice because digital user interfaces are counterintuitive for that generation, many of them, and there's potential for it. And I've yet to see a digital therapeutic in that space, but I certainly think that there's an opportunity to work with voice only, or it could be a mixed interface with voice plus UI.
Wonderful. And how different are the principles for a patient-centric DTx app versus a digital platform for clinical trials?
Good question. There are going to be overlaps because ultimately, whoever the user is of the application, they're human, right? They have expectations, right? Basic human behavioral theory is going to apply to a lab technician as much as it is going to apply to a patient. So it's all relevant. Obviously, there are different dynamics at play because if you're an employee of a company, it's your job to use that specific piece of software for your job. Then there's going to be some sort of top-down expectation for you to use it, right? So there are different dynamics at play, but when it comes to we're designing clinical decision-making tools as well, and obviously users are humans, and the basic rules apply of how do you drive engagement, how do you reduce the time it takes to perform tasks, how do you reduce the amount of errors in one of these tools. Ultimately, playing with these principles are going to help you achieve some of those objectives.
Great, thank you. And in terms of quantifying the impact of the engagement factors, are there some that, in your opinion, are more impactful than others?
Can you repeat the question, please? Quantifying the impact of...
Yeah, of course. So in terms of when you're quantifying the impact of the engagement factors, are there some ways that are more impactful than others?
Right, okay. I think it's hard to say at this stage. I would have to go back to the slides. Actually, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna have a look at the short list here, and I'm gonna see, because I have been asked this question before. I think that really Quantifying progress is a really, really important one. Being able to see people see a progress, have a metric system so they can see where they're going and have those progress bars. I think that you know, a lot of these have sort of similar weight. Effortless interactions for me is a really, really important one. Because as I said to you earlier, active tracking or logging your current symptoms or whatever you have to log on a daily basis, if you don't do it, there's no data. So ultimately you have to do it. So the real key for me is making those interactions effortless. Now, this is where, for example, voice can be very powerful because you're removing that effort of it happening, right? Yeah, I would say effortless interactions for me is probably the most important.
Great, thank you. And we have another one. Where do DTX products fit in the context of increased decentralization and growing care coordination?
Yeah, obviously, you know, I said that again, I said that earlier on, patient autonomy is a key component of decentralization of healthcare. This is about patient autonomy. This is about patients taking, you know, more responsibility for self-management of a condition or a disease. So ultimately, we will see, you know, this is a this area is going to grow because we do know that decentralization is happening. We do know it's important. And, you know, these types of applications that will enable patients to take more of an active role in managing their condition, reducing the burden on the healthcare system, is key.
Great, thank you. We also have another question from Adam, and that's how well do the patient experience principles that you outlined apply to encouraging use and adoption of RPM solutions by clinicians, where their health system has deployed remote care programs like hospital at home or post-discharge care?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that I think I alluded to this in terms of healthcare professional adoption is as important as patient adoption for digital therapeutics, right? And it's really, really important for them to adopt it. I think some of these are more relevant than others. I think that evidence that for the again, you know, for example, we know there are you know, reimbursement codes now for remote patient monitoring in the US, right? So that's a key driver for them adopting it. But ultimately, the ability for a healthcare professional to actively see that a patient is adhering to a treatment program via RPM is what's going to drive adoption, in my opinion, because they're really, truly going to see the value. Ultimately, the end game here is for them to see evidence of efficacy, which is still yet to be proved in some digital therapeutics. Some more mature ones have got data to prove that. If that answers the question, I hope it does.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, and with that, I think we've reached our time for today. If your question wasn't answered, we will definitely follow up. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you to Star and Christopher for such a wonderful program. After this webinar, you will receive a link to the video from us, so please feel free to share it with others who may not have been able to attend today live. And with that, please make sure to check out massmedic.com to see all of our upcoming events and give us a like and follow on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.